All right, it's time for another episode. So that means it's time for pre-cals.
Yes.
Robert, what's going on today?
And I'm telling you, we're in for a special treat today. We have with us Dr. John Cronin. He is the current Senior Vice President of Clinical Development with Apnimed. They are an early stage pharmaceutical company that is developing novel therapeutics for treating sleep apnea. And he was previously the Chief Medical Officer with Philips. And then prior to that, he was with Better Night as the President and Chief Medical Officer. So we've got one of the best in the business with us today. And I know that he's going to share some significant insight into their current products that they have in development and some of the other things that are happening on the Apnomed front.
All right, so for people that are not as smart as you, like myself, when you say novel therapeutic options, you mean like a pill
Like a
for sleep
pill.
apnea?
Yes, the magic pill.
The
We'll
magic
find
pill.
out if it's the magic pill. I think they're in phase 3 clinical trials right now, and a lot of those patients have already. I know they're fully enrolled, and a lot of those patients have completed their part of the research. So. It will be absolutely interesting to hear how that's going and what he anticipates from a future standpoint about the use of pharmaceuticals to treat sleep apnea and what patient populations may be best to see that type of treatment.
All right. I mean, once again, it sounds like it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, the guest is going to be amazing, but I think the conversation is going to be very interesting as well.
Well, we are definitely in for a treat today, and I'm telling you, we just have the best guest. We're very fortunate on this podcast to get some of the best in the business, and Dr. Cronin certainly is one of those.
Well, with that being said, let's go to the show. Now, a word from our sponsor, Medbridge Healthcare. Medbridge Healthcare is a leading provider of sleep lab management services and home sleep apnea testing. Medbridge partners with hospitals, healthcare systems, and medical academic institutions to offer comprehensive, fully integrated services for sleep disorders.
Lights out.
Welcome, everyone, once again to another episode of Sleep Tech Talk, the sleep podcast with your hosts and friends, Emerson Kerr, Robert Miller, and me, Dr. Gerald George Mannikarote. Folks, thank you once again for listening in and tuning in. It's been some fabulous episodes, and it's all because of you, for your listening, for your liking, and your sharing the shows with each and every one of your friends. It's because of that we're able to bring in fantastic guests, amazing guests. We've got a very special guest today. But before that, we just want to say thank you, and thank you to you, and thank you to the sponsors, because without all you folks out there, we just can't do this, and we do this for you. All right, with that being said, Robert, could you tell us what's going on today?
Well, I certainly thank you, Jerry. So today we have with us Dr. John Cronin. He is the Senior Vice President of Clinical Development with Apnomed. Um, One of the most exciting, oral medication for sleep apnea companies that they have lots of things in the development and pipeline stage, and we're going to get to hear some things about that today. But Dr. Cronin, thank you for joining us today. We would love to just jump right into the show today and let's learn a little bit about you, your history in the world of sleep medicine. It's funny because all four of us actually have some history together in at Philips, and we can talk a little bit about that. But welcome to the show, and we'd love for you just to jump in and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thank all of you actually for producing this show and providing our field with so much great content over the years. So it's really great to see you guys, bring your collective wisdom and new things to the forefront. So thanks for inviting me. And I feel really honored to be here. It's essentially we're all here, I guess, accidentally, right? No one intentionally becomes a sleep medicine specialist, business person, et cetera. And in my particular case, my pathway to where I am now has been a delightful, happy accident, to use the words of Bob Ross. I became a young doctor, and I was enamored of life in the ICU with major interventions to save lives and take care of patients, and found myself in a little clinic room in a VA hospital near Boston, and started seeing these CPAP machines come through, and really didn't know much about them. And ultimately, what I did know and what I saw at that time really is that patients came in and loved them. And patients often knew more about them than the doctors that I was working with. And in fact, the best person to learn from was the respiratory therapist that was in the clinic. He knew everything. So that transformation really caught me and made me very fascinated with this field, because the other side of the pulmonary field that I was in was, basically managing chronic illness like COPD and asthma, which are critically important, but you don't always get that transformative patient response. So that led to a life in sleep and sleep research. And I was very fortunate to have some very good sleep mentorship when I was at Harvard with Chuck Seisler and David White, who you guys know from Philips Respironics. As life happens, my wife, who is an academic, moved me from Boston to California, and I had a 15-year career in what I call legacy healthcare, seeing patients every day, administering care for sleep disorders, really exploring that field in every day was a treat. But I'll tell you, it came to a point where I felt like I was not doing a good enough job. And the analogy I use is that essentially I was like a master chef, and I was cooking meals for patients, and every meal was a really gourmet meal. But the line out the door of the starving patients and the hungry patients was getting longer and longer. And so I really started to try to figure out how to innovate and get to that and scale and improve things for people that could benefit from sleep apnea care, which led me to a company called Better Night, where we started to build, at least I had some initial efforts in that, a nationwide network of telehealth sleep providers to be able to get care quicker, sooner, higher quality, which then led to Philips. And I was very honored to join that team at Philips, really a high level team, and spent some good years there. Obviously, we had some unfortunate issues with a big CPAP recall that you guys know just about as everything you need to know about that. But through that introduced me to what was going on at Apnimed, where I am today. And so I've been at Apnimed for about 2.5 years, leading the clinical development program. And essentially, our mission is really straightforward, which is we are mission driven to develop the first oral novel therapeutic for obstructive sleep apnea.
So, Dr. Cronin, you and I got to work together at Philips, and we certainly got to enjoy the excitement of that recall. But we'll put that behind us for this conversation. When you think about the journey you've had, you've seen how sleep has changed and changed and changed, and how you were able to make this gourmet meal. Now that you're at Apnimed and you're looking at sleep through a different lens, I would say. What do you see happening now from a pharmaceutical standpoint? Because we had Dr. Farrell on just recently, and one of the comments that came out of it was, we went from this reverse vacuum cleaner to this incredible solution that has saved many lives. But now we know so much more through endotyping, through really being able to know more about the person than we ever have before. How is that informing you, and how is this leading to different care in pharmaceuticals?
Well, I think the pharmaceutical industry is just different than the device industry. But as ground truths, CPAP is an amazing therapy. It works for so many people. And I think when I reflect on the efforts that we've spent in the pharmaceutical space, it's really undeniable that there's so many patients that either can't use that treatment or won't use that treatment. So even if we can all agree, and I think we can, that CPAP is great for the right patients, there's still a lot of people that can't access the benefits of good sleep. And so that's a founding principle, I think, of sort of a patient-centered concept of, let's give the patients what they want and what they'll use and what they'll benefit from. And then from that, you can say, well, what can we do? And I think, this work is, so many scientists have built upon this, which is really whether you call it an endotype, but just really more precision as to how can you keep that airway open. And so when we think about developing a drug around this, we've really focused in on sort of a neuromuscular pathway. So at least our main compound that we're working on right now, it's really focused on trying to activate the musculature of the upper airway to help keep that airway open at night in a way that is clinically sufficient to solve the problem or at least mitigate the problem for the right patients. And then you could sort of think of like, well, what's the next generation of that as well, which is, could you do that better, more precise, different side effects, or maybe there are different patient types, right? So you have COMISA, you have standard obstructive sleep apnea. You might have obstructive sleep apnea with certain comorbidities. And those all might be a little different when you think about what drugs would be best for those people.
I know with the various drugs that you have in development currently that 8109 has certainly had the most publicity and the most information publicized about the medication. Can you tell us a little bit about the breakdown of the two different medications that make up 8109 and how that works specifically to treat sleep apnea? It's a completely interesting topic to me, and I nerd out a little bit on how these things work specifically, and because it's interesting that you have two different medications that have been on the market for a long time treating different health issues, and now to have this combination therapy that seems to be successful.
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. It's interesting because a lot of people don't know about 8109 out there, but really there's been, I would say, over a decade of research of people trying to get at this idea, can we use a drug to treat sleep apnea? And there have been numerous drug studies, smaller ones in the past, looking at different types of agents, and nothing really that compelling. And then it was roughly, I think it was around 2016, Luigi Taranto, our chief scientific officer, together with Andrew Wellman at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, they sort of, well, let's just say they had a theory, and they put that theory into practice in terms of testing these two particular compounds together to see if they could affect the upper airway. And sort of like that eureka moment, they were really astonished with how impressive the results were for the first time, whereas in the past there really hadn't been any. So the compound you're referring to, 8109, is a combination therapy, and it's basically one pill that combines two drugs within it. And these are at a fixed dose. One is R-oxybutynin. R-oxybutynin is what we call a novel compound. It's an R enantiomer of oxybutynin. The class of medication is an antimuscarinic, and this helps counter some of the muscarinic signaling that occurs during sleep, particularly REM sleep, around the upper airway. So think of by blocking that signal, we might stabilize the upper airway. And then second, the medicine is atomoxetine. And atomoxetine is a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. And this drug increases the presynaptic presence of norepinephrine in the hypoglossal motor neuron, which is responsible for controlling the upper airway muscle tone. And so those two things in combination seem to work, at least in complementary, if not synergistically, to improve the airway caliber and airflow. And then the atomoxetine also, the R-oxybutynin also helps mitigate some of the alerting side effects that can come with atomoxetine. So together we see, and we saw in our phase 2 studies, a very consistent, and we're seeing this through our entire development program, that we're seeing this impact the airway in positive ways.
Is there any issue with sleep fragmentation with this combination of medications?
Well, if you look at our phase 2 study called Mariposa, which was published last year, showed that, so we looked at all the different components from atomoxetine to R-oxybutynin in the combination. And really what we see with the combination is that, and this is somewhat predictable, that you preserve sleep time, but you get a slight reduction in REM sleep, about a 10% reduction in REM sleep after taking the medicine for 4 weeks. That usually comes at not the expense, but what you see is a little bit increased stage 2 sleep as a result. The correlate here would really be, I guess, in general, the class of medicines like antidepressants that are classically known to have a slight reduction in REM sleep, something that's understood, incorporated into practice, not of known clinical significance, but an observational finding. So, we're attentive to that, and we're going to see in our phase 3 study that comes out later this year, kind of, the full picture of sleep architecture and efficacy, things like that.
Before we go, we would like to thank our sponsor, Medbridge Healthcare. Medbridge Healthcare is developing innovative inpatient, post-discharge, and population health programs to screen comorbid conditions, diagnose, and treat sleep disorders. Learn more about their innovative solutions and career opportunities at medbridgehealthcare.com. Once again, you can learn more about their innovative solutions and career opportunities at medbridgehealthcare.com.
That's great.
Dr. Cronin, are you beginning to see any kind of breakout here where certain patients are not candidates for this type of medication? Have we gotten to that place yet to understand the patients that would fall out and wouldn't be candidates for this combination drug?
Well, you'd have to look at our clinical trials. And so, as you know, every clinical study has inclusion and exclusion criteria. And in our phase 3 study, which is currently underway, we've enrolled patients with mild to severe sleep apnea across a big range of BMI from as low as 18 all the way up to 42. So, really casting a wide net. We do know with the component compounds, the R-oxybutynin and atomoxetine, there are different medications, for instance, that probably you shouldn't be on at the same time. And so there are some exclusions around those specific medicines, specific drugs that are metabolized through the same pathway and things like that. And then ultimately, we also enroll patients that we believe have your very typical type of sleep apnea, meaning it's not clearly an anatomical issue related to, massive tonsils or a small jaw, large tongue, where we can say, okay, this is really in that range of, you've got somewhat sort of standard airway crowding, and you have a neuromuscular sort of deficiency that's letting that airway collapse. And then I'll say, we'll find out from the phase 3, hopefully we'll come with some learnings as to, maybe some people respond better to the medication, or maybe some people respond poorly, and we'll be able to better understand that, such that if this becomes a reality for doctors and patients in the field, that they'll be able to, better fine tune what they do for their patients.
I think this is all exciting. I think it's great for patients. I think we probably all agree with that it's great to have another solution and another tool in our tool belt to help treat these patients with sleep apnea. But just shifting gears just a little bit, because one of the things that Apnomed has also produced recently, I would say fairly recently, has been the SHINE study. And can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe what some of the learnings were from that particular report?
Yeah, certainly, I'd love to. Real honor. I mean, the SHINE survey is a survey that was conducted here at Apnimed. Really got to give credit to Alyssa Mendoza and Kate Schneider and our team that put this together, which essentially is the largest survey study of people who are living with obstructive sleep apnea, and what is their experience as kind of the ground truth of sleep apnea. And so SHINE stands for Sleep Health Inquiries on Needs and Emotion of People with OSA. And so we were able to provide a questionnaire to about 1,500 patients with obstructive sleep apnea across all different types of severities and demographics and age range, to explore in their own words sort of what are they seeing and what are they feeling with their sleep apnea. And on a personal level, for me, I feel like, oh, well, I know a lot of this because I've been seeing sleep patients for 20 years, and we've all heard the different stories, the common symptoms, the uncommon symptoms. But this really, for me, took it to another level in terms of really understanding what happens beyond the initial symptoms. So, fatigue, check mark, sleepiness, check mark. Those are common symptoms that I think most of us can understand. whether they're present or not. But the SHINE survey really gave color and life to this idea. Well, what happens after that? And for me, the aha moments were really that this is a condition, a disease that really carries a lot of stigma with it. It has the ability to really isolate people, dislocate them from their loved ones, from their friends, their family, socially getting, to a point where, you don't really want to spend time with other people because you feel fatigued, feeling judged by other people because you're sleepy. We've all seen almost like the humorous ads of CPAP out there that, this is not really aspirational, and that puts people in a box, and I think it creates a degree of a type of emotional suffering that I don't know that I really plumbed as a physician deeply as maybe as I should have. And for me, it's a great exploration of this issue. And then the other thing is that it's been really great to see the patient community and the advocacy groups come together around this type of work. So this work was done sort of in partnership with, the Alliance of Sleep Apnea Partners, Project Sleep, the Academy, other really important stakeholders in this issue. And so it's nice to see that component of our field get stronger and impress upon us all how important it is to put the patient at the center of what we do. And I know our leadership and our whole company has really taken that to heart, and we're trying to make that evident in everything that we do in this effort.
So, Doc, you talked about several very interesting points, and kind of to put them together, at the time of diagnosis of, okay, patient has obstructive sleep apnea, where would the medication fit in the treatment plan versus CPAP or any other things that are out there right now?
Well, that's a great question. And I guess I hesitate to speculate because we're still talking about an investigational drug. And we really need our 2 phase 3 registrational studies to report out later this year to help really inform that. And I think our field is coming to grips with what does it mean to have successful therapy when you have the standard bearer being CPAP, which is it can be 100% effective in the right patients, to 0% effective to patients who don't come in or who reject it. Where do we rest, and what is enough therapy, right? And so I can say from our phase 2 studies, we see a range of different types of responses. Some people have a complete response. Their AHI goes less than 0 and their symptoms improve. Other patients may have a 50% improvement or a 30% improvement. And I don't think we have sufficient understanding as a field to know what does it mean to get a 30% reduction in your AHI, or maybe stated another way, a 30% improvement in your oxygenation. Is that enough? And for what type of patient? And if you're a patient who can't tolerate CPAP and essentially has no options, is 30, 40, 60, 70% improvement worth it to you? Those are the types of questions I think the field needs to be asking. And fortunately, with what was reported out this past year with tirzepatide and Eli Lilly, we're starting to have those conversations a little bit more robustly.
It's interesting you say that. Among the conversations we have a lot on the show is about women and sleep, and the criteria that we have right now to decide, what sleep apnea it is or isn't, is really built around men and the rule set there. And when you look at how you're trying to decide what success looks like, it even kind of folds back into how we decide what the criteria is for what sleep disorder breathing is. If we have this movement away from AHI, then what are the metrics that we begin to look at? Because with women, that may be a different set of metrics in the future. When you look at it from that standpoint, and what we're learning about endotypes, how does that change, what you begin to consider as success? If we take AHI off the table and think of how a medication could begin impacting these different variables, what does that change for you? How do you begin to assess success when the rules, could potentially change in the future as we learn more about the airway and breathing?
Well, yeah, there's a lot there. And
Yeah.
I think very
Sorry.
important questions. I mean, I think clearly AHI is our main biomarker. Like we've all lived and died that. And there's always robust discussions about, is there a better biomarker? How can we better risk adjust? And I think the field is progressing there nicely, whether it's hypoxic burden or heart rate response. And this intersects with diagnostics too, and I'll come back to that. But ultimately, it's really hard to unseat the AHI. It's understood. It's basically a frequency metric. Most of us can get our minds around it. Certainly, it's on every sleep study, so it's hard to displace that. But you could see that being informed also by some of these other things, whether it's gender, BMI, an indication of cardiometabolic risk, whether it's the heart rate response to an apnea or hypoxic burden. But that, that adds complexity and work, and, I'll just call it the connective tissues of the field that we've all built and worked around are hard to change. Even simple things like getting hypoxic burden into the diagnostic report of a sleep study is difficult to do. And so I think the smart scientists out there will continue to have to help us really understand that and say, okay, well, what does it mean if I take someone with a hypoxic burden of X and I improve that by 2X? Does that mean that my job is done and I don't need to reduce the HI less? Things like that. It's an exciting time. There's a lot to be discovered, I think.
I think there's a whole podcast episode on just that topic, by the way, because that's really interesting.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think we're all trying to get there. And, we've got some, I think maybe a little inertia in our field because the AHI is it's so usable and readily accessible. But, even simple things that be in my bonnet about even how we call sleep apnea mild, moderate, severe. Talk about something that's really insulting. Tell a patient with mild sleep apnea that it's mild when, they're falling asleep at the wheel, or, they're undergoing a divorce because their wife is fed up with them, or, whatever it is. It's not mild for them, right? And so this balance between cardiovascular long-term outcomes and health versus your current symptoms, things like that. There's probably a whole lot of diversity there.
Hey, Doc, we're getting close to time, and actually we've gone past time, but it's been really interesting. But before we close, wanted to know, what's the future look like? What do you see on the horizon, and what can you tell us in terms of oral medications for sleep apnea? Because it's the magic pill, right?
Right. Well, yeah, I think I'm really optimistic and enthusiastic. There's a lot to anticipate. I mean, clearly we'll see how our current program to Apnomed goes. I can also speak to the fact that we do have pipeline activities looking at different ways to approach this problem through an oral medication. Some of that will deal with endotypes, which in my mind is still in the R&D realm of what we're doing. But I think we're really sort of breaking the ice on what's possible and exploring for the very first time what else we could do. The analogy I've used a little bit, and like any analogy, it has its limitations, is really like the diabetes world. We used to just have insulin. Yes, insulin will drive your glucose down. However, and now we have this rich tapestry of different ways to put together a result for a patient based on their unique considerations, circumstances, demographics, needs, and wants. And I think there's plenty of space. So we estimate there's about 80 million people in the US with obstructive sleep apnea. The far majority aren't even diagnosed. We all need to come together as a field to solve this problem in whatever way we can find, essentially.
Well, Doc, the conversation's been amazing. And before we go, anything else you want to add, and where can people get more information about the work that's being done at Apnimed?
Well, I guess I'd point people obviously to our website, www.apnomed.com. We have our trials listed in clinicaltrials.gov. Our 2 phase 3 studies are currently fully enrolled. So Patients are now exiting that study, and we hope to have a big announcement later this year for the results of those studies, which we don't know because all the data is blinded. And we'll take the next step in the journey together. And I really appreciate this conversation with you guys and all the work that you do and how you help us all stay current and informed.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Doc. We sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you all out there for listening. We can't thank you enough for being there for us and continuing your support. We also thank our sponsors for their support as well. It's been a fantastic ride, and we just continue to grow all because of you. And be sure, once again, to hit the like button, continue to subscribe, and most importantly, share with all your sleep friends, everybody in the sleep field, and all those who are sleep curious. So until next time, we say, lights on. Are you a sleep tech looking for new opportunities? Well, Medbridge Healthcare is one of the largest employers of sleep technologists, and they are growing. If you are a sleep technologist interested in a new position, potential paid relocation, or looking for a career advancement, consider a career with Medbridge Healthcare. Now back to the show. All right, now that was quite a show. It's time for some post-cows. Robert, what did you think, man?
Oh my gosh, Jerry. I mean, I could listen to Dr. Cronin talk for most of the day. I mean, we
Amen.
have so many topics that we could, sort of unpack from what, he was, what he was talking about. And I didn't get a chance to tell my story, so I'll do it really, really quickly now that I did have the opportunity to hear from some of the research folks who are involved in their program. And this is a real life patient story. So I think it's important to add this to the show today that, one of the patients who was involved in the clinical trial had previously been on CPAP, but was on the medication. And
Okay.
that she reported back to the researchers that it was the first time in 20 years that she was able to go on vacation and sleep next to her husband without her CPAP machine, and she didn't snore after taking the medication. So just,
That's amazing.
phenomenal. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yes.
Restoring marriages, that's another thing that we do in the world of sleep medicine these days. But man, what a great show. What great content, to hear all the things that Apnomed and, I want everyone who's involved in the world of treating patients for sleep apnea to keep up to date on these new therapies and things that are on the horizon. And, what better, I guess, method for them to do that than to listen to Sleep Tech Talk?
Hey, Sleep Tech Talk. You hear it here first, and you get all the latest news on the technology regarding to sleep health, right?
Yes, absolutely. But we've got to have Dr. Cronin back. He's phenomenal.
I was just going to say the same thing. We need to have him back, and not just an update, but he touched on several points that would have, if each of those points would have been a separate episode on its own. So I'd love to have him back on. It's just amazing to talk to.
Absolutely.
All right, you ready to close?
Let's close it up. We miss Emerson. He can only join us for the show today. So we sorry Emerson, we didn't get to have you for pre-cows or post-cows today.
Yeah, that would have been fun. But hey, fingers crossed that we got him there for the next one.
That's right. That's right.
Well, folks out there, thank you so much. And until next time, we say cheers.
Sleep Tech Talk is sponsored by ReactHealth. Within our LunaPAP device line, each offering is FDA approved, encompassing CPAP, APAP, bilevel, and bilevel ST models. Our thoughtfully selected array of PAP interfaces and accessories complement our LunaPAP device line while accommodating diverse patient requirements.